Okay, guys, today we're going to be talking about acids and bases, just kind of intro to what they are, and then we're going to talk about how to name acids and bases. What are the differences between them? So, what's an acid and what's a base? So, an acid is anything, I'm going to focus on down here, anything that has a hydrogen that kind of starts with it. And so, because it has those hydrogens, it has more hydrogen ions, and this is important when we're talking about acids and bases. So acids have hydrogen ions, and bases we're going to find out have something different. So these are sour to taste, can kind of burn your throat. So like when you drink a soda, there's acid in that. These, because there's an excess of these positive ions, and they can pass electricity. And so we've talked about what electrolytes were in previous videos. And when these things react with metals, they give off hydrogen gas, okay? So here's some common examples of acids. So hydrochloric acid, that's what's in your belly when you eat your food, and that's what breaks down the food so that you can absorb stuff. Battery acid, sulfuric acid. Acetic acid is vinegar, common cooking ingredient. And then we have a citric acid, which is found in lemons. One thing I want you to see is all of these start with hydrogens. And so that's going to be our common thing to remember when we're writing out the formulas for acids. They start with hydrogen. What's a base then? Well, bases are bitter to taste. Think of like your toothpaste. They can transfer electricity as well, so they are also electrolytes. And this should make sense to us when we break apart and the hydrogen ions and the hydroxide ions dissociate. They have more positive or more negative charges, and so the electricity can pass through them. These feel slippery to the touch, and these have these hydroxide ions that we talked about. So acids, hydrogen ions, bases, hydroxide ions. All right, what are some examples of bases? First thing I want to point out are that most of the bases are going to end in hydroxide ions. So they're always written second because they have a minus charge. But there are a few exceptions, and one of them is ammonia, and it is NH3. It's a household cleaner. We talked about the dangers of mixing that in bleach in the first semester, I believe it was. But the rest of these are going to be ending in hydroxide. So this is sodium hydroxide that's used in drain cleaners. So if you have clog in your sink, you might use some Drano. The main ingredient is sodium hydroxide. Calcium hydroxide is common name is lime. It's used in mortar to make brick walls, the stuff that glues all that stuff together. And then magnesium hydroxide, which is an antacid. And we'll talk maybe more about that when we talk about neutralizing things. But anyway, that's kind of the basics of what acids and bases are. Now we're going to get into how we write out the chemical formulas and then also name them, because their acid or base name is maybe a little bit different than its chemical name. And so we'll try to hit on some prior knowledge from first semester. Okay, as we've already kind of talked about a little bit, acids are going to have hydroxide ions, and they will start with those because it has a positive charge. Bases are going to end their compounds with hydroxide ions because those are minuses. Okay, this kind of goes back to what we learned first semester with naming compounds. Okay, so for example, if we had hydrogen bonded with acetate, we wouldn't call it hydrogen acetate because it is an acid now and we change its name, okay? So these are the name kind of rules for naming acids and bases. So we said that it was going to be hydrogen acetate, that would be its chemical name, but we change the ending when it's an acid. And so if we take a look at the back of our periodic tables, we see that it changed to, instead of hydrogen acetate, we drop it, we just call it acetic acid, HC2H3O2. Okay, And so if its chemical name ended in ITE, hydrogen, we'll just pick one, hydrogen nitrite right here, nitrite, it would change to nitrous for the acid, nitrous acid. Okay, so we go back over here. If it was HNO3, it'd be, according to these rules, it would be hydrogen nitrate. We would change it to nitric acid. Okay, and so we change that is an 8 changed to ick, ite changes to us, and then the last one is ide. So if I had hydrogen chloride as an acid, I would call it hydrochloric acid. All right. Okay, the last one is naming bases. Again, if we take a look at this, bases, because they have a negative charge, they end in hydroxide. So I take whatever the hydroxide is bonded with, I name that base using the hydroxide at the end. All right, so now let's take a look at some example problems that you guys will be working on. Okay, so there are the rules. Here's our first example. Okay, so sulfuric acid, okay, it ends in ic, so to write it, I know I'm going to have a hydrogen. And sulfuric would mean that it is sulfate, and if I look off of my chart, sulfate is right there. It is SO4 with a negative 2 charge. SO4 with a negative 2 charge. Because this is negative 2, we cross this down here. And so sulfuric acid is H2SO4. That is its chemical formula. Okay. If I have sulfurous acid, okay, us reversing is ite. So I need to look at sulfite. That's SO3. So it is H, because it's an acid, so it starts with H. SO3. It still has a -2 charge, but so this 2 comes down here. So it's H2SO3. Sulfuric acid, H2SO4. Okay. Ic is 8. H2SO4 is sulfurous acid, H2SO3. Okay, going to these naming rules again. Hydrosulfuric acid. Hydroic, it means that it is an ide. So I know that this means that I have hydrogen with a sulfur, because the ides are off of the front of the periodic table. I still have to remember its charges. Sulfur's charge is right here. It is a -2 as well. So I have a -2 here. So this crosses down. So it is H2S. Okay, so these are the different variations for those 3 chemical formulas and those 3 acid names. Okay, now I can also reverse this, and sometimes I might need to write down the name of it. So, okay, so if you take a look at this is working backwards. Okay, I know that PO4 off of my periodic table is phosphate. Phosphate turns to ic. So this is going to be phosphoric acid. Okay, phosphoric acid. All right. Okay, so it's just working backwards. Okay, I look off the chart, I find that's a phosphate. I look up here, fates, the ending changes to ic, and so instead of phosphate acid, it's phosphoric acid. All right. That doesn't start with an H, so it ends in hydroxide, so I know that that is a base, and so it is going to end in hydroxide. So I look off the periodic table, what is Ba? Ba is barium, so this is going to be barium hydroxide, and that is our base, and that's how we name those. Okay, so
On your homework assignment, you're going to see questions like these where you're going to have to work back and forth, and that's pretty much how we name acids and bases.